Good morning, Dr. Joe here at Atlas Health, and today I'll be continuing our discussion, our ongoing discussion on how a restricted diet such as autoimmune, paleo, ketogenic, and FODMAP and or any other diet that causes a severe restriction in food can and will make you worse over time. And basically the core of this issue is something called loss of oral tolerance. And just a brief summary, if you want more detail on this issue, we have a number of videos. This is number 4 in the series. And so check those out. But basically the biggest trap out there for folks is if they do a food sensitivity test, or if they know they have a food sensitivity, and the biggest trap is to say, okay, well, I have a positive on this food test, or I know if I eat this test, then if I eat this food, I should say that I have a reaction, so I'm just going to avoid that food, or I'm going to avoid what I show positive on. And then there's this honeymoon phase of feeling better, and then eventually, if the loss of oral tolerance, which we described in great detail prior, isn't remediated, then they end up with new food sensitivities, and they end up back where they started, or potentially worse. So today, in part 4, we're going to discuss another key variable in the loss of oral tolerance, and that being the microbiome. And we actually have more bacteria in our colon or in our bowel than we actually have cells in our body. It's an incredible volume of organisms living inside us, and it should be this symbiotic thing. And so when we're looking at the microbiome, we're looking at a number of things. We're looking at total number, we're looking at diversity, we're looking at location. Okay, so we need the right amount of bacteria. We need it to be diverse enough so there's an ecosystem that inhabits that area, and it needs to be balanced. And then part of that balance is, do specific things live where they're supposed to live? Okay, and then after that, we need to know, is there any infectious disease going on in there, or is there anything that's not supposed to be in there? And then we also need to know something just about the lining of the intestine in general, as it relates to what are called biofilms. Okay, so first of all, the question I get all the time when I start talking about the microbiome is, what probiotics am I supposed to take? And it's kind of like answering the question, what am I supposed to eat? And the answer is, I don't know, without actually doing a test. And if you've never done a stool test that looked at the quantity and qualitative assessment of what's living in there, I highly recommend it. There's a saying in naturopathic medicine, which is pretty morbid, which is pretty accurate actually, which is death begins in the colon. And so, again, a person should have 1 to 2 bowel movements a day. It should be one well-formed piece, not several pieces. It should not have any undigested food in it. It should sink like a stone. It should be dark brown, and there should be no stool on the tissue paper at all. Okay? So like the perfect bowel movement really is like that ghost bowel movement, where you have a bowel movement and then look in the toilet and like it's not there, and then there's nothing on the toilet paper. You're like, did that actually happen? And that should happen like once a day. That would be perfect. Okay? If you're not having that, then investigating your microbiome by doing a stool test is something I highly recommend. If you've never done that and you've ever been on antibiotics, you have to do it. I mean, there's this, in order to get an answer of what's going on there, I just would highly recommend that. The other thing is, if you've ever eaten food that has antibiotics in it, like dairy for a period of time, or like meat that wasn't non-organic or certainly had antibiotics in it, then odds are you've been exposed to antibiotics. If you drink water that isn't filtered, there's a chance that you've been exposed to antibiotics, even if you've never taken them. So I highly, highly, highly recommend doing a stool test. With that in mind, just to summarize a little bit, you need the right amount of you need the right amount of bacteria